Alright, so I got a question from Scott, and he said, can you meet God while astral projecting? Now, to answer this question, I'm going to first need to explain a little bit about my beliefs, but take this with a pinch of salt because everyone's beliefs are different, and the truth is, there are lots of things we still don't know, and we really won't know, I guess, until we pass on from this life and our consciousness or our soul goes on to the next or whatever experience is beyond that. We really don't know for sure. However, there's a few interesting things here. Firstly, we have a number of near-death experiences reported and out-of-body experiences in which people claim to meet God, Jesus, consciousness, different entities and beings in many different ways. What they seem to have in common, and this is always what I find the most interesting, is when you look at experiences and see what people have in common, what is like a usual thing to experience. And when you have a near-death experience, there is a very commonly reported feeling of bliss, peacefulness, knowing that everything's going to be okay, and faith that you're moving on to a better place and you're being integrated into a bigger, higher energy source. That seems to be across the board, no matter where you're from, how you had your near-death experience. It seems to be a pretty common thing that people experience, is that feeling. So that being said, that makes me think, okay, well there probably is something, and this is, one of the reasons I started to believe in astral projection and research and learn about it more, is that I just couldn't deny all of these first-hand experiences from all around the world throughout history. But specifically about this question, right, from our buddy Scott, can you meet God during astral projection? Well, yes you can, but it really isn't that simple. So when you astral project, firstly, it's difficult to do. It's very difficult to astral project, and if you've tried to do it, then you'll know how difficult it can be. Much more difficult than lucid dreaming. So you have, like I've said in a previous video, you have, let's say if you have the population as a whole, right? A small percentage of that population know about astral projection, an even smaller percentage can do it, and an even smaller percentage will be able to reliably and regularly astral project to the point where they can do things or decide to do things like try and meet God, try and achieve specific goals, and try and do things that they've planned beforehand, However, in terms of stories, what stories have I heard? Scott says, what stories have you heard in this area? Well, I've heard all kinds of things from all different types of people about this, about meeting God or source, the base reality. There are many different names for this, right? And I'm not talking specifically about God in the Christian sense or even the Muslim or the Hindu or any sense, really. I'm talking about God as in what we can all agree on, regardless of religion and cultural doctrines and everything like that. I'm talking about the ultimate or source-based reality which we came from, something we're all connected to, and this is where different religions go off on different sort of tangents here with their belief systems. But I think what we can all agree on and what we really fundamentally know deep down, if we really strip away our ego and our perspectives and cultural programming, we're all connected. We're all part of the same basic thing, and there are many ways of describing that: consciousness, source reality, God. Okay, we're all part of that. We are all that in essence, right? So in terms of meeting God as a specific entity in astral projection or in the astral realm, well, you can do it, but who's to say whether that is actually God or whether it's just like an embodiment of God, another God-like character? Because we are all God in a sense. We all come from and are that source reality, that collective and base consciousness. That is what we are. So by asking that question, you're sort of assuming and expecting that God is a person far out there, up in the clouds, completely separate to you. And this is where your belief system comes into play. Me personally, I don't believe that is the case. I believe, yes, God is a higher energy source, a higher being, but we are all parts of that. So whether we can actually meet God in that sense, in astral projection, it's kind of debatable. There are stories, yeah, but who's to say who or what these people have actually met during their OBE? You can't really prove any of this. You can't prove whether it was or was not God that you met. And this is where the stories, you kind of have to take them with a bit of a pinch of salt, because you can't really tell what actually happened without being there and experiencing it for yourself. So that is what I would suggest firstly, is to do it yourself, see what you experience, and then make of that what you will. Try and interpret or understand it based on what you experience, not based on someone else's story. Because they could have met any entity and claimed it was God. They could have met a random being, an extraterrestrial, anything is in the astral realm. So there's no way of knowing for sure who or what you experienced during an OBE. And then you have, of course, the other side of this, the other half of the argument, where people just think that astral projection is another expression of this consciousness and of lucid dreaming. Now this is where it's going to get a bit tricky, okay? And this, you have to make your own mind up about this. I can't tell you what to believe with any of this stuff, but the other side of things, the other sort of half, if you will, of people believe that astral projection is just another form of lucid dreaming, another type of another state of consciousness, right? We have different states of consciousness, being awake, dreaming, sleeping, lucid dreaming, and then different sort of altered states of consciousness, many induced by substances like DMT, ayahuasca, LSD, salvia to some degree. These different things can alter our states of consciousness and let us experience things in a different way. So those type of people would just argue that astral projection, well, it's just like a lucid dream. It's just a different state of consciousness, meaning that you're not really interacting with God, as it were. You're just basically experiencing something else or a different way of looking at things from within your consciousness as a human. And that is what I kind of disagree with, mainly because I fundamentally believe we are not just this human shell. This is basically like a vehicle. This body, this human body that we're in, is like a vehicle. And if you've had a near-death experience, as I have, you will know that that is true, because you will have this glimpse, this sort of, you almost remember the full story as you're in this near-death experience. You almost remember it, and then you're sort of snapped back into this reality, and you kind of forget. And you remember like there was something important was about to happen, but you can't quite put your finger on the details of it. You just remember that this probably isn't all there is. This body that we're in is probably just a small part of the bigger picture. However, you find all kinds of stories online. People, especially on Reddit and other forums, they tend to be very vocal about their experiences. They're very open to sharing them, which is good in a way. But it also leads to exaggeration, because you know the crazier your story is, the more attention it will get, if that's what you're trying to do on Reddit, for example. And you also have people who exaggerate what they experienced. You know, let's say if me and you have the same exact experience, and we won't report it in the same way. One of us might exaggerate details, okay? We might see or focus on different parts of the experience, meaning that it sounds either more intense and crazy or less intense or crazy, depending on how you basically experience it and share it. So you have to take stories online with a bit of a pinch of salt, because you don't know for sure what they've experienced. You only know what you've experienced. So going right back to the start, can you experience or meet God during astral projection? Well, it's certainly possible, but you have to bear in mind the things I said, okay? And try and trust in your intuition and your experiences more than you trust in a story you've read online. Because I know they sound crazy and exciting, but you can't really take that as being super accurate. You need to basically experience this stuff for yourself. And if you are interested in learning how to astral project safely and reliably, because you need to be able to do it regularly to really get a hold of how to do it, check the link in the description. There's a beginner's guide course which explains exactly how you can do it safely, how you can do it regularly, so that you can actually start to build up the experiences for yourself. You also need to bear in mind that your expectations and what you believe will happen is a very powerful force when you're astral projecting. If you expect and believe that you're going to meet God or whatever being you want to meet in an astral projection experience, you will. But that's not to say that you know who or what it is. If you expect to do, I know this sounds confusing, right? But if you expect to do something and then you have that experience, that doesn't mean that you are actually having that experience with what you think is that entity. For example, in a lucid dream, if you expect that you're going to go and meet Einstein, you're going to meet him, but whether it will actually be him or not, well, that's kind of up to debate. I mean, some people would say no. Some people would say that yes, you are actually interacting with Einstein through the higher collective and the higher consciousness. It's almost as if you're plugging into the internet through your third eye. I've spoken about this in other videos. But yeah, in terms of meeting God, as it were, in an OBE, you kind of have to try it for yourself.